My mother stood up in front of our entire congregation and announced that I was the family disappointment during testimony Sunday. 3 minutes later, Pastor Williams called my name and asked me to come forward. What happened next would transform not just my life, but the lives of hundreds of women who had been told they weren't enough. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning light filtered through the stained glass windows of Cornerstone Baptist Church as I sat in the back pew, hoping to remain invisible during what had become my monthly ritual of endurance. At 25, I had perfected the art of disappearing into the wooden bench, my worn secondhand dress a stark contrast to the designer outfits that surrounded me in this affluent suburban congregation. My name is Sarah Elizabeth Matthews, though most people in my family simply called me Sarah, with the kind of resigned disappointment usually reserved for discussing broken appliances or failed investments. I had grown accustomed to being the afterthought in the Matthews family legacy, the daughter who had somehow failed to live up to the standards that seemed effortless for everyone else. The Matthews family occupied a position of considerable respect within Cornerstone Baptist Church and the broader community of Willowbrook Heights, an upscale suburb outside Nashville, where success was measured in square footage, luxury vehicles, and social media followers. My father, Robert Matthews, owned Matthews & Associates Financial Planning, a firm that managed investments for some of the wealthiest families in Tennessee. My mother, Patricia Matthews, served as the church's director of women's ministries and maintained a lifestyle blog called Southern Grace Living that attracted thousands of followers who admired her perfectly curated life. Then there was my older sister, Rebecca Matthews Sterling, who had married into the Sterling family fortune at 23 and now lived in a mansion overlooking the Cumberland River. Rebecca possessed everything that I apparently lacked: effortless, beauty, social grace, an MBA from Vanderbilt, and the ability to make everything she touched turn to gold. She ran a successful interior design business that catered to Nashville's elite, appeared regularly on local television programs discussing home decorating trends, and had recently announced her pregnancy with what would be my parents' first grandchild. I, on the other hand, worked as a night shift clerk at Mercy General Hospital, earning barely enough to afford my studio apartment in a neighborhood that my family pretended did not exist. While Rebecca had sailed through college with sorority, leadership positions, and academic honors, I had struggled to complete my nursing degree at a community college, working multiple jobs to pay tuition that my parents deemed an unworthy investment. The contrast between my circumstances and those of my family members had been a source of tension for years, but it had reached a crescendo in recent months as my parents' disappointment became increasingly difficult to conceal. Family gatherings became exercises in subtle humiliation, where my achievements were dismissed with faint praise while Rebecca's successes were celebrated with elaborate enthusiasm. My work at the hospital involved managing patient intake during the overnight hours, coordinating with emergency responders, and providing support to families during some of their most difficult moments. The position required patience, compassion, and the ability to remain calm under pressure, qualities that I had developed through years of navigating family dynamics that often felt more challenging than any medical emergency. Despite the demanding nature of my work, my family viewed my career as evidence of my limited ambitions and practical failures. During dinner conversations, my father would discuss Rebecca's latest business contracts and design awards, while asking me generic questions about how work was going, with the tone typically reserved for inquiring about the weather. The disconnect between my family's perception of my worth and my actual contributions to the lives of patients and families at Mercy General had created a growing sense of isolation that was particularly acute during church services. Cornerstone Baptist Church emphasized family values and community support, yet I often felt like an outsider observing a performance in which I had no meaningful role. My faith had always been complicated by the contradiction between the unconditional, love that was preached from the pulpit, and the conditional acceptance I experienced from the congregation members who knew my family's story. The church community had watched Rebecca's wedding planning with excitement and anticipation, while my single status at 25 was discussed in hushed tones as a source of concern and prayer requests. The morning that would change everything began like countless others, with me arriving at church alone and taking my customary seat in the back row where I could observe without drawing attention. My parents and Rebecca typically sat in the third pew from the front, a position that reflected both their financial contributions and social standing within the congregation. Pastor Williams had announced that this Sunday would feature an extended testimony service, where congregation members would be invited to share personal stories of faith, struggle, and redemption. These services often became emotional experiences that brought the community together through shared vulnerability and mutual support. As the service progressed, various members stood to share their experiences. Business owners discussed how faith had guided them through economic challenges. Parents shared stories of children overcoming difficulties. Elderly members reflected on decades of marriage and family growth. The testimonies created an atmosphere of collective celebration and mutual encouragement. Then my mother stood up, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the morning light as she adjusted her designer suit jacket, and walked to the microphone with the confidence that characterized all her public appearances. Patricia Matthews never spoke without preparation, and her testimony services were typically polished presentations that reinforced her reputation as a spiritual leader and devoted family woman. "I want to share something that has been weighing on my heart," she began, her voice carrying the practiced cadence of someone accustomed to addressing large groups. "As many of you know, Robert and I have been blessed with 2 daughters, and I want to talk about the different paths that God has laid out for our family." The congregation settled into attentive silence, expecting another carefully crafted narrative about family blessings and divine guidance. My mother's testimonies were usually uplifting stories that reinforced the church's values, while subtly highlighting her family's achievements and spiritual maturity. "Rebecca has been such a blessing to us," my mother continued, her voice warming with genuine pride. "She has built a successful business, married a wonderful Christian man, and is now expecting our first grandchild. She demonstrates every day what it means to live according to God's plan and to use the gifts He has given us." Murmurs of approval rippled through the congregation, as Rebecca's accomplishments were well known and widely admired within the church community. She was frequently held up as an example of young Christian womanhood, someone who had successfully balanced professional achievement with traditional family values. "But I also want to talk about the challenges that every family faces," my mother said, her tone shifting slightly as she paused for effect. "We have another daughter, Sarah, who has struggled to find her way. Despite our prayers and guidance, she has chosen a path that brings us concern rather than celebration." My stomach clenched as I realized that my mother was about to use me as a cautionary tale in front of hundreds of people who knew our family. The back pew suddenly felt exposed rather than protective, and I found myself wishing that I had chosen to skip church entirely. Sarah works nights at a hospital, which keeps her away from church activities and family gatherings. She lives alone in a part of town that worries us constantly. At 25, she shows no interest in marriage or starting a family, despite our encouragement and the prayers of this community. The congregation had become completely silent, sensing that this testimony was different from my mother's usual presentations. I could feel eyes turning toward me as people connected my mother's words with my presence in the back of the church. "I share this not to embarrass Sarah, but to ask for your continued prayers as we try to understand how 2 daughters raised in the same home, with the same values and opportunities, can turn out so differently. Sarah has become what I can only describe as the family disappointment, and we trust that God has a plan even for situations like this." The words, "family disappointment," echoed through the sanctuary with devastating clarity. creating a moment of shocked silence that seemed to stretch indefinitely. I felt the weight of hundreds of eyes as congregation members turned to locate me in the back pew, their expressions ranging from sympathy to curiosity to judgment. My mother returned to her seat with the satisfied expression of someone who had delivered an important message, apparently unaware of the public humiliation she had just inflicted on her daughter. My father nodded approvingly, while Rebecca looked uncomfortable but remained silent, unwilling to contradict our mother's assessment. The aftermath of my mother's testimony created an atmosphere of uncomfortable tension that Pastor Williams needed to address before the service could continue. He stood slowly, his expression thoughtful, as he considered how to respond to what had just occurred. Pastor Williams was a man in his early 50s who had led Cornerstone Baptist Church for nearly a decade. He was known for his thoughtful sermons, genuine compassion for struggling members, and ability to address difficult situations with grace and wisdom. Unlike many pastors who focused primarily on successful members and generous donors, Pastor Williams made efforts to connect with people who felt marginalized or overlooked. "Thank you, Patricia, for sharing your heart with us this morning," he said diplomatically, acknowledging my mother's testimony while carefully avoiding endorsement of her characterization. Family challenges are something that every one of us can understand, and your willingness to be vulnerable reminds us that we all need prayer and support. He paused for a moment, scanning the congregation before his eyes found mine in the back pew. Something in his expression suggested that he was about to say something unexpected, something that had not been planned or prepared in advance. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sarah Matthews, would you please come forward? I believe God has given me something to say that concerns you directly. The request sent shockwaves through the congregation and created a moment of absolute silence that felt heavier than anything my mother's testimony had produced. Being called forward by the pastor was typically reserved for special recognition, emergency prayer requests, or serious disciplinary matters. I sat frozen in my pew, unsure whether Pastor Williams intended to compound my humiliation or address it in some way. The walk from the back of the church to the front altar would require passing my family's pew and exposing myself to the scrutiny of every congregation member. "Sarah, please don't be afraid," Pastor Williams said gently, his voice carrying an unusual warmth and urgency. "What I have to share will be a blessing, not a burden. Trust me, and trust that God has a purpose for this moment." With trembling legs and a racing heart, I stood from my pew and began the longest walk of my life down the center aisle of Cornerstone Baptist Church. Every step felt amplified in the absolute silence, and I could sense the collective breath-holding of hundreds of people who were witnessing something unprecedented. As I reached the front of the church and turned to face the congregation, Pastor Williams placed a gentle hand on my shoulder and smiled with genuine warmth that contrasted sharply with the tension that had characterized the previous few minutes. "Sarah Matthews has been a member of our church community for her entire life," Pastor Williams began, his voice carrying clearly through the sanctuary. "But I suspect that most of you don't know the real Sarah, the woman whose character and service have impressed me more than almost anyone I have encountered in 25 years of pastoral ministry." The shift in tone was so dramatic that it created visible confusion among congregation members, who had expected either further humiliation or generic pastoral comfort, rather than what appeared to be preparation for extraordinary praise. What happened next would not only transform my relationship with my family and church community, but would also reveal truths about service, calling, and purpose that would reshape my understanding of my own worth and potential. The moment when Pastor Williams called my name marked the beginning of a journey that would take me from being labeled as a disappointment to discovering a purpose that would impact hundreds of lives in ways I never could have imagined. The morning that began with public humiliation was about to become the foundation for a transformation that would prove that God's plans often look very different from human expectations, and that sometimes the people who are dismissed as disappointments are actually being prepared for extraordinary purposes that require exactly the qualities that others fail to appreciate or understand. Standing at the front of Cornerstone Baptist Church with Pastor Williams' hand on my shoulder, I felt the weight of hundreds of eyes examining me with newfound curiosity. The silence in the sanctuary was profound, broken only by the subtle sounds of shifting fabric and barely audible whispers as congregation members tried to process what was unfolding before them. Pastor Williams stepped slightly forward, positioning himself between me and the congregation in a gesture that felt protective rather than threatening. His expression carried a gravity that I had rarely seen during his sermons, suggesting that whatever he was about to share had been weighing on his heart for some time. 6 months ago, I received a phone call that changed my understanding of what true Christian service looks like, Pastor Williams began, his voice carrying clearly through the sanctuary's excellent acoustics. The call came from Dr. Elizabeth Harrison, the chief medical officer at Mercy General Hospital, and she was calling to tell me about one of our church members. My breath caught in my throat as I realized he was referring to my workplace, the hospital where I spent my nights managing patient intake and supporting families during medical emergencies. Dr. Harrison was a woman I deeply respected, someone whose medical expertise was matched by her genuine compassion for patients and their families. Dr. Harrison told me about a young woman who worked the night shift in their emergency department, Pastor Williams continued, his voice growing warmer as he spoke. She described someone whose presence had transformed the atmosphere of the hospital during the most difficult hours, when families receive devastating news and when patients arrive in critical condition. The congregation remained completely silent, hanging on every word as Pastor Williams painted a picture that seemed disconnected from the family disappointment narrative my mother had presented just minutes earlier. I could see my parents exchanging glances, clearly confused about where this testimony was heading. According to Dr. Harrison, this young woman had developed an unofficial ministry within the hospital walls, Pastor Williams explained, turning slightly to include me in his remarks while still addressing the congregation. She spent her breaks sitting with elderly patients who had no visitors, holding their hands and listening to their stories. She created care packages for homeless individuals who came to the emergency room seeking shelter, not just medical attention. As Pastor Williams spoke, memories of countless nights at Mercy General flooded my mind. I thought about Mrs. Chen, an 87-year-old woman with dementia whose family lived across the country and who often became agitated during night shifts until I started spending time reading to her from her favorite poetry books. I remembered the young mother who had brought her feverish toddler to the emergency room at 2 a.m. and had broken down crying when she realized she could not afford the prescription medication, leading me to quietly arrange for the hospital's charity fund to cover the cost. But what impressed Dr. Harrison most, Pastor Williams continued, his voice rising slightly with enthusiasm, was this young woman's ability to provide comfort and hope to families facing the worst moments of their lives. She had become known throughout the hospital as someone who could help grieving families find peace, who could explain complex medical situations in understandable terms, and who never left anyone feeling alone or abandoned. The picture Pastor Williams was painting felt both accurate and surreal. I had never considered my hospital work as anything more than doing what felt natural and necessary when confronted with human suffering and need. The idea that my actions had been noteworthy enough to prompt a phone call from the chief medical officer to my pastor seemed impossible to believe. Dr. Harrison called me because she wanted to recommend Sarah Matthews for the hospital's annual Humanitarian Service Award, Pastor Williams announced, his words creating a visible ripple of surprise throughout the congregation. This award is given to one individual each year who exemplifies exceptional dedication to serving others, and Sarah was selected from among hundreds of hospital employees and volunteers. I felt my knees weaken as the full impact of Pastor Williams' revelation began to sink in. The Humanitarian Service Award was one of the most prestigious recognitions that Mercy General Hospital offered, typically given to physicians, senior nurses, or department directors who had made significant contributions to patient care or community service. But that's not all, Pastor Williams continued, clearly building toward something even more significant. Dr. Harrison also called to inform me that the hospital board had decided to offer Sarah a full scholarship to complete her Bachelor of Science in Nursing degree, followed by support for pursuing a master's degree in hospital administration. They want her to develop her natural leadership abilities and expand her impact within the healthcare system. The scholarship revelation created audible gasps throughout the sanctuary, as the financial value and professional significance of such an opportunity was immediately apparent to everyone present. A full educational scholarship from a major hospital represented not just monetary support, but recognition of exceptional potential and a pathway to significant career advancement. My mother's face had gone pale as she processed the disconnect between her public characterization of me as a disappointment and the reality of recognition I had received from one of the region's most respected medical institutions. My father appeared stunned, while Rebecca looked as though she was seeing me for the first time. The reason Dr. Harrison called me personally, Pastor Williams explained, was because she wanted to understand how our church had produced someone with such remarkable compassion and dedication to serving others. She assumed that Sarah's character and service orientation must have been nurtured by our faith community, and she wanted to express the hospital's gratitude for our role in developing her exceptional qualities. The irony of Dr. Harrison's assumption was not lost on me, given that my family and church community had consistently failed to recognize or appreciate the very qualities that had impressed the hospital's leadership. The disconnect between external recognition and internal family dynamics created a cognitive dissonance that was almost overwhelming. Pastor Williams paused for a moment, allowing his words to sink in before continuing with what appeared to be the most important part of his message. I have to confess to this congregation that Dr. Harrison's call convicted me deeply about how well we truly know and appreciate the members of our church family. Here was someone from outside our community, recognizing the extraordinary service and character of one of our own members, while we had failed to see what was right in front of us. The pastoral confession created an atmosphere of uncomfortable reflection throughout the sanctuary, as congregation members began to consider their own assumptions about fellow church members and the criteria they used to evaluate worth and contribution. Sarah Matthews has been living out the gospel message every single night for the past 3 years, Pastor Williams declared, his voice carrying clear conviction. While many of us sleep comfortably in our beds, she has been providing comfort to the suffering, hope to the desperate, and dignity to the forgotten. She has been serving as Christ's hands and feet in one of our community's greatest places of need. The transformation in how the congregation was viewing me was visible across their faces, as people began to reconcile the person they thought they knew with the individual Pastor Williams was describing. The night shift worker they had pitied was being revealed as someone whose service had earned recognition from medical professionals and whose impact extended far beyond what anyone had imagined. But there's something else that Dr. Harrison shared with me that I believe this congregation needs to hear, Pastor Williams continued, his tone becoming more intimate and personal. She told me that Sarah had never once mentioned her family's prominence in the community or used her connections to seek special treatment or advancement. Despite coming from a well-known and respected family, she had earned every recognition purely through her own merit and dedication. This detail seemed to particularly impact my parents, who had grown accustomed to leveraging their social connections and financial resources to create opportunities for Rebecca while assuming that I lacked the initiative or ability to achieve anything significant on my own. Pastor Williams turned to address me directly, his expression reflecting genuine warmth and respect that I had rarely experienced from authority figures. Sarah, I owe you an apology on behalf of this church community. We have failed to see and celebrate the ministry that God has called you to, and we have allowed superficial measures of success to blind us to the profound impact you are having on our community." The personal apology from Pastor Williams in front of the entire congregation was both validating and overwhelming. For years, I had felt invisible and undervalued within the church community, attending services out of habit and obligation rather than feeling truly welcomed or appreciated. "The hospital has asked me to present you with the Humanitarian Service Award during our service this morning," Pastor Williams announced, producing an elegant crystal award from behind the podium. "But more importantly, they have asked me to invite our entire church community to recognize and celebrate the extraordinary ministry that has been happening among us." As Pastor Williams handed me the crystal award, the congregation erupted in spontaneous applause that felt different from the polite acknowledgement typically given during church announcements. The applause was sustained and enthusiastic, reflecting genuine appreciation and perhaps some guilt about their previous failure to recognize my contributions. The weight of the crystal award in my hands represented more than recognition for my hospital work. It symbolized validation of a calling and purpose that I had been pursuing intuitively without fully understanding its significance or value. The tangible evidence of external appreciation provided a counterpoint to years of family disappointment and community indifference. Pastor Williams raised his hand to quiet the applause and continued with what would prove to be the most transformative part of his message. "But God is not finished with Sarah Matthews yet. The hospital scholarship is just the beginning of what I believe will be an extraordinary journey of service and leadership." The suggestion that my recognition was just the beginning rather than the culmination of my achievements created a new level of anticipation throughout the sanctuary. Pastor Williams seemed to be building toward an announcement that would extend beyond the hospital award and scholarship opportunity. "Last week, I received another call, this time from the Regional Baptist Association," Pastor Williams explained, referring to the organization that coordinated ministry efforts among Baptist churches throughout Middle Tennessee. "They have been searching for someone to lead a new initiative focused on healthcare ministry and community outreach, and Dr. Harrison recommended Sarah for this position." The revelation that my hospital work had led to recommendations for denominational leadership positions seemed impossible to process. The Regional Baptist Association represented dozens of churches and thousands of church members, and leadership positions within the organization were typically reserved for seminary graduates and experienced pastors. The position would involve developing healthcare ministry programs across our regional churches, training volunteers to provide spiritual support in medical settings, and creating partnerships between faith communities and healthcare institutions. Pastor Williams continued, "It's a role that requires exactly the combination of medical knowledge, spiritual maturity, and practical experience that Sarah has been developing through her night shift ministry." The scope and significance of the opportunity Pastor Williams was describing far exceeded anything I had ever imagined possible for someone with my background and credentials. The idea that my hospital work could become the foundation for a broader ministry seemed both thrilling and terrifying. The Regional Association has offered to provide additional educational support, including seminary courses in pastoral care and healthcare ministry, to prepare Sarah for this leadership role, Pastor Williams added. They see her as someone who can bridge the gap between faith communities and medical professionals in ways that traditional ministry approaches have struggled to achieve. As Pastor Williams outlined the educational and professional opportunities that were being offered, I began to understand that my life was at a pivotal moment that would require choices about directions I had never considered possible. The path from night shift clerk to regional ministry leader seemed too dramatic to be real, yet the specificity and credibility of the opportunities suggested otherwise. I share all of this with our congregation not just to celebrate Sarah's achievements, but to challenge all of us to reconsider how we identify and nurture the gifts that God has placed within our church family, Pastor Williams said, his message clearly directed toward the broader community rather than just acknowledging my individual situation. The pastoral challenge created visible discomfort among some congregation members, particularly those who had been most vocal about traditional measures of success and social status. The implication that they had failed to recognize authentic, spiritual gifts and callings was difficult to dismiss given the evidence Pastor Williams had presented. Sarah Matthews represents what I believe is God's call for our church to move beyond superficial measures of success and begin recognizing the extraordinary ministry that may be happening in unexpected places and through unconventional methods. Pastor Williams declared, his voice rising with prophetic intensity. The transformation that had occurred in the sanctuary over the past 20 minutes was remarkable. I had entered the morning labeled as the family disappointment, but I was now standing before the congregation holding a humanitarian award and being described as a model for authentic Christian service and calling. My mother's expression revealed the struggle she was experiencing as she tried to reconcile her public characterization of me with the reality Pastor Williams had presented. Years of dismissing my choices and achievements had been suddenly contradicted by recognition from medical professionals and denominational leaders. The morning that had begun with humiliation and shame was becoming a revelation about purpose, calling, and the difference between worldly success and meaningful service. The recognition I was receiving felt both validating and challenging, as it suggested responsibilities and opportunities that would require growth beyond my current capabilities and comfort zone. Standing at the front of Cornerstone Baptist Church, with hundreds of people looking at me with newfound respect and curiosity, I began to understand that my life was about to change in ways that would test everything I believed about myself and my potential for making a difference in the world. The final hymn concluded with the congregation's voices harmonizing in a way that felt different from previous Sundays, as though the morning's revelations had created a deeper sense of community and shared purpose. Pastor Williams offered the closing prayer with particular emphasis on recognizing God's work in unexpected places and asking for wisdom to support each other's callings more effectively. As the service officially ended and people began moving toward the exits, I remained standing at the front of the church, still holding the crystal award that had transformed my identity within this community in less than an hour. The physical weight of the recognition seemed insignificant compared to the emotional and spiritual weight of understanding that my life was about to change dramatically. The immediate aftermath of Pastor Williams's revelation created a receiving line of sorts, as congregation members approached me with expressions that ranged from genuine congratulations to barely concealed embarrassment about their previous dismissive attitudes. Mrs. Eleanor Fitzgerald, the church treasurer who had frequently made pointed comments about my irregular attendance at social functions, was among the first to approach. "Sarah, dear, I had no idea about your work at the hospital," Mrs. Fitzgerald said, her voice carrying the careful tone of someone attempting to repair a relationship they had inadvertently damaged. "What you've been doing sounds absolutely wonderful, and I'm sure we'd all love to hear more about how we can support healthcare ministry in our community." The transformation in Mrs. Fitzgerald's attitude was representative of broader changes occurring throughout the congregation, as people who had previously viewed me through the lens of my family's disappointment began reassessing their assumptions and seeking ways to demonstrate their newfound appreciation. Dr. James Morrison, a cardiologist who attended our church and had always been polite but distant during our brief interactions, approached with obvious professional interest. "Sarah, I've heard excellent things about your work at Mercy General from several colleagues. The kind of patient advocacy and family support you've been providing is exactly what our healthcare system needs more of. I'd love to discuss some potential collaboration opportunities when you have time." The professional recognition from Dr. Morrison carried particular weight because it came from within our church community and confirmed that Pastor Williams's description of my hospital work was not exaggerated or based on incomplete information. The validation from a respected physician helped establish my credibility among congregation members, who might have questioned the significance of recognition from outside sources. However, The most challenging interactions came from my immediate family members, who were struggling to reconcile their long-held perceptions with the reality that had been presented to the entire congregation. My father approached first, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something that looked almost like uncertainty. "Sarah, this is quite a surprise," my father said, his voice carefully neutral as he processed the implications of the morning's revelations. "I have to admit that your mother and I weren't fully aware of the scope of your work at the hospital. Perhaps we should sit down and discuss these opportunities that Pastor Williams mentioned." The suggestion of a family discussion represented a significant departure from our typical interactions, which generally involved my parents providing guidance and expectations while I listened politely and attempted to explain my choices. The possibility of being consulted about my own future rather than being advised about it felt both welcome and unfamiliar. My mother's approach was more complicated, as she was clearly struggling with the public nature of her earlier testimony, and its contrast with the information Pastor Williams had shared. Patricia Matthews had built her reputation on having comprehensive knowledge of her family's activities and achievements, and the discovery that she had been unaware of my recognition suggested gaps in her understanding that were difficult to acknowledge publicly. "Sarah, honey, I think there may have been some miscommunication about your situation," my mother said, her voice carrying the diplomatic tone she typically used when managing social difficulties. "Obviously, your father and I are very proud of your achievements, and we want to make sure we're supporting you properly as you consider these new opportunities." The characterization of our family dynamics as a miscommunication, rather than a systematic pattern of dismissal and disappointment, revealed my mother's difficulty in accepting responsibility for her earlier testimony. However, her willingness to publicly acknowledge pride in my achievements represented progress from her previous position. Rebecca approached last, her expression reflecting a combination of surprise, confusion, and what appeared to be genuine respect for accomplishments she had not previously understood or appreciated. My sister had always been supportive within the constraints of our family dynamics, but she had also accepted our parents' assessment of my limitations and potential. "Sarah, I feel terrible that I didn't know about any of this," Rebecca said, her voice carrying what sounded like authentic regret. "I've been so focused on my own business and pregnancy that I haven't been paying attention to what you've been accomplishing. Can we talk sometime this week? I'd really like to understand more about your work in these opportunities." The request for a private conversation with Rebecca represented an opportunity for rebuilding our sister relationship on a foundation of mutual respect, rather than the previous dynamic where she had been positioned as the successful daughter, while I had been seen as the disappointment. The possibility of authentic sisterly connection felt both appealing and necessary for moving forward. As the immediate family interactions concluded and the sanctuary began to empty, Pastor Williams approached me with an expression that suggested he had additional information to share beyond what he had revealed during the service. His demeanor indicated that our conversation would involve practical next steps rather than just ceremonial recognition. "Sarah, I hope you weren't overwhelmed by everything that happened this morning," Pastor Williams said, his voice carrying genuine concern for my emotional well-being. "I realize that the public nature of this recognition may have created some pressure, and I want to make sure you feel supported as you process these opportunities." The pastoral concern was appreciated, as the morning's events had indeed been emotionally overwhelming in ways that would require time and reflection to fully understand. The transformation from family disappointment to community recognition had occurred so rapidly that I had not yet had time to consider the implications for my relationships and future decisions. "I also want to discuss the practical aspects of the opportunities I mentioned," Pastor Williams continued. "The Regional Baptist Association has asked me to schedule a meeting with you this week to discuss the healthcare ministry position in detail. They're hoping to begin the program within the next 6 months, which would give you time to complete the current semester at the hospital while preparing for this transition." The timeline Pastor Williams outlined suggested that the opportunity was more immediate and concrete than I had initially understood. The possibility of transitioning from my current night shift position to a regional ministry role within 6 months seemed almost too rapid to be manageable, yet the support structure he described made it appear feasible. Additionally, the hospital has asked me to convey their hope that you'll accept the scholarship opportunity regardless of your decision about the ministry position, Pastor Williams explained. Dr. Harrison emphasized that your educational advancement would benefit their institution, even if you ultimately choose to pursue other directions for your career. The separation of the educational opportunity from the ministry position provided flexibility that made both possibilities more appealing. The scholarship would enhance my capabilities and credentials regardless of my ultimate career direction, while the ministry position offered a pathway for expanding my impact beyond individual patient care. I want you to know that you have my complete support regardless of which direction you choose, Pastor Williams said, his tone conveying both encouragement and respect for my autonomy. What's most important is that you make decisions based on your understanding of God's calling for your life rather than external pressure or expectations. The pastoral guidance represented a significant contrast to the family pressure I had experienced throughout my life, where choices were evaluated based on their alignment with predetermined expectations rather than their connection to personal calling and purpose. The freedom to make decisions based on my own discernment felt both liberating and challenging. As Pastor Williams concluded our conversation and began addressing other post-service responsibilities, I found myself alone in the sanctuary for the first time since the morning's events had begun. The familiar space looked different now, as though the physical environment had been transformed by the spiritual and emotional revelations that had occurred. Sitting in the front pew where I had stood to receive recognition, I began processing the full implications of the morning's events for my understanding of identity, purpose, and potential. The Crystal Award resting beside me represented external validation of internal calling that I had been pursuing without fully recognizing its significance or value. The disconnect between my family's perception of my life and the reality of my achievements had been revealed so dramatically that it forced me to reconsider fundamental assumptions about worth, success, and recognition. For years, I had internalized my family's disappointment and assumed that their assessment of my choices and potential was accurate. The revelation that medical professionals and denominational leaders viewed my work as exceptional and worthy of significant investment challenged not only my family's perspective, but also my own self-perception. The night shift work I had considered merely dutiful had been recognized as ministry worthy of regional leadership opportunities. However, the morning's events had also created new pressures and expectations that would require careful navigation. The public nature of the recognition meant that my decisions about future opportunities would be scrutinized by both supportive and skeptical observers within the church community. The scholarship opportunity represented a pathway for developing capabilities that would enhance my effectiveness regardless of my ultimate career direction. The structured educational support would provide both knowledge and credentials that could support various forms of healthcare ministry or patient advocacy. The regional ministry position offered an opportunity to expand my impact beyond individual patient interactions to systematic program development that could affect multiple communities. The scope of potential influence was both inspiring and intimidating, as it would require leadership skills that I had not yet fully developed. Most significantly, the morning's events had forced me to confront the difference between seeking approval from people who could not recognize my value and pursuing calling that aligned with my authentic capabilities and passions. The recognition I had received came from people who had observed my work directly, rather than evaluating it against predetermined expectations. As I prepared to leave the sanctuary and begin conversations with my family about the opportunities Pastor Williams had presented, I understood that my life was at a turning point that would require courage to pursue possibilities that exceeded everyone's previous expectations, including my own. The transformation from family disappointment to recognized servant leader had occurred so rapidly that it seemed almost surreal. Yet the concrete nature of the opportunities suggested that This change was both authentic and sustainable. The challenge would be learning to believe in my own potential as fully as others apparently did. The morning that had begun with public humiliation had become a revelation about divine purpose, and the possibility that what appears to be failure or disappointment from one perspective may actually be preparation for extraordinary service and impact from another. The Crystal Award represented not just recognition of past service, but investment in future potential that would require faith and determination to fulfill. Walking toward the church parking lot where my family waited to begin discussions about these unexpected opportunities, I carried both the weight of new responsibilities and the lightness of finally understanding that my unconventional path had been leading toward something significant all along. The family disappointment narrative was being replaced by a story of calling and purpose that would challenge everyone's assumptions about success and service. The conversations that lay ahead would test whether this transformation could become the foundation for authentic relationships, built on mutual respect, rather than the previous dynamic of conditional acceptance based on external achievements. The morning's revelations had created possibilities for both professional advancement and personal healing that would require wisdom and grace to navigate successfully. The Matthews family gathered around the mahogany dining table in my parents' formal dining room that Sunday afternoon, a setting that had historically been reserved for important family discussions and holiday celebrations. The elegant space, with its crystal chandelier and oil paintings of pastoral scenes, seemed almost intimidating as we prepared to address the morning's revelations and their implications for our family dynamics. My mother had spent the drive home from church in uncharacteristic silence, while my father made several phone calls to business associates, apparently seeking information about the Regional Baptist Association and its ministry programs. Rebecca had followed us in her Mercedes SUV, having canceled her usual Sunday brunch plans with her husband's family to participate in this unexpected family conference. The formal nature of our gathering reflected the gravity of the situation we needed to address. For the first time in my adult life, I was being consulted about major decisions rather than simply being informed about expectations or receiving advice about corrections to my chosen path. The shift in family dynamics was both empowering and unsettling, as it required me to articulate thoughts and feelings that I had previously kept private. My father opened the discussion with the methodical approach he typically brought to business negotiations, having apparently spent the drive home developing a framework for evaluating the opportunities Pastor Williams had presented. Robert Matthews approached family decisions with the same analytical rigor he applied to investment strategies, though his usual confidence seemed tempered by the morning's unexpected developments. "Sarah, I think we need to understand the full scope of these opportunities before we can provide meaningful guidance," my father began, his voice carrying the careful tone he used when navigating unfamiliar territory. "The scholarship offer from Mercy General represents significant financial value, and the ministry position with the Regional Baptist Association appears to offer substantial professional advancement. However, we need to evaluate both the benefits and the potential risks of each option." The business-oriented approach to discussing my future felt familiar, yet the underlying assumption that my input would be valued in the decision-making process represented a fundamental change from previous family interactions. Throughout my life, family discussions about my choices had generally involved my parents presenting their preferred direction while I listened and attempted to explain my perspective. "The first thing we need to clarify," my father continued, "is the specific terms of the scholarship offer. Educational benefits can vary significantly in their scope and requirements, and we should understand exactly what commitments would be involved before making any decisions." The practical focus on contractual details reflected my father's professional background in financial planning, where comprehensive understanding of terms and conditions was essential for making sound investment decisions. However, his approach also revealed his assumption that these opportunities should be evaluated primarily through economic and professional advancement criteria. My mother's contribution to the discussion reflected her different priorities and concerns, focusing on the social and reputational implications of the choices I was being asked to consider. Patricia Matthews had built her identity around maintaining the family's standing within the church and broader community, and she appeared to be processing how my recognition might affect those relationships. "What concerns me," my mother said, her voice carrying the diplomatic tone she used when addressing sensitive social issues, "is that we may be rushing into decisions based on emotional responses to this morning's events. The recognition Sarah received was wonderful, of course, but we need to consider whether these opportunities align with long-term family goals and expectations. The suggestion that my decisions should be evaluated based on alignment with family goals rather than personal calling reflected the fundamental difference in how my mother and I understood the purpose and direction of my life. Her emphasis on family expectations revealed her continued difficulty in accepting that my path might legitimately diverge from the traditional trajectory she had envisioned. I'm also concerned about the practical implications of Sarah leaving her current position at the hospital, my mother continued. She has built relationships and established herself in that environment, and it seems risky to abandon that stability for opportunities that may not ultimately prove sustainable or fulfilling. The characterization of my hospital work as establishing myself represented a significant shift from her previous dismissive attitude toward my night shift position. Yet it also revealed her limited understanding of the nature and scope of my current responsibilities. My mother's concern about abandoning stability reflected her preference for predictable advancement over the uncertainty inherent in pursuing calling and purpose. Rebecca's perspective on the situation brought a different dimension to our family discussion, as she had experience with entrepreneurial decision-making through her interior design business and could understand the appeal of pursuing opportunities that aligned with personal passion and expertise. Her successful navigation of professional independence provided a model for evaluating risk and opportunity that differed from our parents' more traditional approach. "I think we're focusing too much on the risks and not enough on the extraordinary nature of what's being offered to Sarah," Rebecca said, her voice carrying conviction that surprised me given her usual deference to our parents' opinions. The fact that medical professionals and denominational leaders are actively recruiting her suggests that they see potential that we may have been missing. These aren't charity offers or sympathy positions. They're genuine opportunities based on recognized merit and capability. Rebecca's defense of the opportunities being offered to me represented a significant departure from our typical family dynamics, where she had generally supported our parents' assessments and expectations. Her willingness to challenge their cautious approach suggested that the morning's revelations had affected her understanding of my potential as much as they had impacted the broader church community. "What impressed me most about Pastor Williams's description," Rebecca continued, "was the emphasis on Sarah's natural ability to provide comfort and leadership in crisis situations. Those are exactly the kinds of skills that the healthcare industry desperately needs, and they're not qualities that can be easily taught or developed if they don't exist naturally." The recognition of my natural abilities rather than focusing on my perceived limitations represented a fundamental shift in how Rebecca viewed my capabilities and potential contributions. Her acknowledgement that certain skills could not be taught, but had to be inherent, suggested a new appreciation for qualities that our family had previously failed to recognize or value. As the discussion continued, I began to understand that this family meeting represented more than just an evaluation of specific opportunities. It was a reckoning with years of assumptions, expectations, and misunderstandings that had shaped our relationships and my own self-perception. The dramatic nature of the morning's revelations had forced all of us to reconsider fundamental beliefs about success, calling, and the criteria for measuring meaningful contribution. My own contribution to the family discussion required me to articulate thoughts and feelings that I had previously kept private, as I had learned to avoid challenging my family's assessments or expressing disagreement with their expectations. The opportunity to speak about my own understanding of purpose and calling felt both liberating and vulnerable. as it required exposing aspects of my inner life that had been largely invisible to my family members. "I appreciate everyone's concern about these opportunities," I began, my voice carrying a steadiness that surprised me given the emotional intensity of the morning's events. "But I think there's something important that we need to acknowledge before we can make any meaningful decisions about my future direction." The attention of my family members focused on me with an intensity that felt different from previous family discussions, suggesting that they were prepared to listen to my perspective with genuine interest rather than simply waiting for their turn to provide guidance or correction. "For the past 3 years, I have been pursuing work that feels like calling rather than just employment," I continued, finding my voice becoming stronger as I articulated thoughts that had been developing without conscious recognition. The recognition I received this morning didn't surprise me because I had accomplished something unexpected. It surprised me because someone outside our family had noticed and valued work that I had been doing out of genuine passion and commitment. The distinction between external recognition and internal satisfaction represented a crucial difference in how I understood the significance of my hospital work compared to how my family had been evaluating my choices. Their focus on traditional markers of success had prevented them from recognizing the authentic fulfillment I had found in serving patients and families during crisis situations. "The reason I work night shifts isn't because I lack ambition or can't find better opportunities," I explained, feeling the need to address assumptions that had shaped family discussions for years. "I work nights because that's when people need the most support, when families are most vulnerable, and when the difference between compassionate care and routine service has the greatest impact on human suffering and healing." The explanation of my motivation for choosing night shift work revealed aspects of my decision-making process that my family had never understood or inquired about. Their assumption that my schedule resulted from limited options rather than deliberate choice reflected their inability to comprehend that I might prioritize service over advancement or convenience. What Dr. Harrison and Pastor Williams described this morning represents validation of calling that I have been pursuing without fully understanding its significance or potential for expansion, I continued, feeling increasingly confident about articulating my perspective. "The opportunities they're offering aren't just professional advancement. They're invitations to develop and expand work that has already proven meaningful and effective." The framework of calling and purpose provided a different lens for evaluating the opportunities than the risk-benefit analysis my father preferred or the social acceptability concerns my mother emphasized. The question was not whether these opportunities represented safe or prestigious choices, but whether they aligned with authentic gifts and passions that had already demonstrated their value. My mother's response to my explanation revealed her struggle to understand how work that required personal sacrifice could be considered preferable to positions that offered greater comfort and social status. Her perspective on career choices had always emphasized external recognition and financial security over personal fulfillment or sense of purpose. "Sarah, I understand that you find your hospital work meaningful," my mother said, her voice carrying the patient tone she used when attempting to guide me toward what she considered more practical thinking. "But meaningfulness and career advancement aren't mutually exclusive. The question is whether these new opportunities offer better prospects for building a stable and respectable professional life." The emphasis on stability and respectability reflected my mother's priorities, yet it also revealed her continued inability to recognize that my current work had already earned respect from medical professionals and denominational leaders who understood its value. Her definition of respectability was based on social perception rather than professional recognition or meaningful contribution. My father's response focused on the practical implications of pursuing opportunities that diverged from traditional career advancement patterns, reflecting his concern about financial security and long-term planning. His business background had taught him to evaluate decisions based on measurable outcomes and predictable returns on investment. "What worries me about both opportunities," my father said, his voice carrying the analytical tone he used when identifying potential problems, is that they represent relatively new and untested programs without established track records for long-term success. The healthcare ministry position especially seems like it could be vulnerable to budget cuts or organizational changes that might eliminate the role entirely. The focus on job security and organizational stability reflected legitimate concerns about pursuing opportunities in emerging fields, yet it also revealed my father's difficulty in understanding that some decisions needed to be made based on alignment with calling rather than guarantees of permanent employment. Rebecca's response to our parents' concerns brought a perspective that acknowledged both the practical considerations they raised and the unique nature of the opportunities I was being offered. Her experience with entrepreneurial risk-taking provided insight into the balance between prudent planning and bold pursuit of meaningful work. I think we're underestimating the significance of the fact that these opportunities came to Sarah rather than her having to seek them out, Rebecca observed, her voice carrying conviction that surprised our parents. When organizations actively recruit someone based on their demonstrated performance, it suggests that they see exceptional value and potential. These aren't risky career experiments. They're investments in proven capability. The distinction between seeking opportunities and being recruited for them represented an important difference that my family had not fully appreciated. The unsolicited nature of both the hospital scholarship and the ministry position suggested that my work had created a reputation that extended beyond my immediate workplace and had attracted attention from decision-makers in multiple organizations. As our family discussion continued into the late afternoon, I began to understand that the decision I needed to make was not simply about choosing between specific opportunities, but about embracing a vision of my life that differed fundamentally from the expectations and assumptions that had shaped my family relationships for years. The recognition I had received represented validation of qualities and contributions that my family had been unable to see or value, yet it also created an opportunity for rebuilding our relationships on a foundation of mutual respect rather than conditional acceptance. The choice was whether to pursue opportunities that aligned with my authentic calling, or to continue seeking approval through conformity to expectations that had never fit my actual gifts and passions. The family reckoning that began with evaluating external opportunities had evolved into a deeper examination of values, priorities, and the criteria we use to measure meaningful success. The conversation that would continue over the following weeks would determine not only my professional direction but also the future of our family relationships and my own understanding of purpose and potential. The week following the church service revelation brought a series of meetings that would fundamentally alter my understanding of professional possibility and personal potential. Each conversation provided new information about the opportunities before me while challenging my assumptions about my own capabilities and the scope of impact I might achieve through dedicated service. Tuesday morning arrived with the scheduled meeting at Mercy General Hospital, where I was to discuss the scholarship, Opportunity and Humanitarian Award with Dr. Elizabeth Harrison and the hospital's administrative leadership. The conference room on the executive floor represented a space I had never imagined entering as anything other than a maintenance worker or emergency responder, yet I found myself sitting across from some of the most respected medical professionals in the region. Dr. Harrison opened the meeting with warmth and professionalism that immediately put me at ease, despite the intimidating nature of the setting and the significance of the opportunities being discussed. Her approach reflected genuine respect for my contributions rather than condescending charity, establishing a tone that would characterize all our subsequent interactions. Sarah, I want to begin by emphasizing that this meeting represents recognition of exceptional performance rather than potential or promise, Dr. Harrison stated clearly, addressing what she apparently recognized as my discomfort with the attention and praise. The Humanitarian Award is given based on documented impact, and the scholarship opportunity has been offered because we have observed your natural leadership abilities and want to invest in their development. The distinction between recognition of past performance and investment in future potential provided a framework for understanding the hospital's motivation that differed significantly from the charity or sympathy that I had feared might be driving their interest. The emphasis on documented impact suggested that my work had been systematically observed and evaluated rather than casually noticed. Dr. Margaret Chen, the hospital's director of nursing education, joined the conversation to outline the specific details of the scholarship program and its requirements. Her presentation revealed the comprehensive nature of the educational support being offered and the institution's serious commitment to my professional development. The scholarship program includes full tuition coverage for completing your Bachelor of Science in Nursing degree, followed by support for pursuing a master's degree in healthcare administration, with a focus on patient advocacy and family services. Dr. Chen explained, her detailed presentation demonstrating the substantial financial investment the hospital was prepared to make in my education. The scope of educational support exceeded anything I had imagined possible, representing not only immediate financial relief, but also access to knowledge and credentials that would enhance my effectiveness regardless of my ultimate career direction. The combination of clinical nursing education with healthcare administration training would provide a unique skill set that could support various forms of patient advocacy and healthcare ministry. Additionally, the program includes internship opportunities throughout your degree completion that would allow you to maintain your current income while gaining experience in different departments and administrative functions, Dr. Chen continued, addressing practical concerns about financial stability during the educational transition. The structured approach to balancing education with employment demonstrated the hospital's understanding of working students' practical needs, while ensuring that degree completion remained feasible within a reasonable time frame. The internship component would provide exposure to hospital operations beyond patient care, expanding my understanding of healthcare systems and management. Dr. Harrison then shifted the discussion toward the broader vision the hospital had developed for integrating patient advocacy and spiritual care services more effectively within their medical programs. Her description revealed institutional recognition of needs that extended beyond clinical treatment to encompass emotional and spiritual support for patients and families. We have observed that patients who receive comprehensive support that addresses their emotional and spiritual needs, in addition to their medical treatment, show significantly better outcomes in terms of both recovery rates and satisfaction with their care experience, Dr. Harrison explained, citing research that supported their institutional commitment to holistic patient care. The evidence-based approach to justifying expanded patient support services reflected the hospital's serious commitment to programs that might seem peripheral to traditional medical practice. The integration of spiritual care with clinical treatment represented progressive thinking that recognized the interconnected nature of human healing and well-being. Your natural ability to provide this kind of comprehensive support has been documented through patient feedback, family testimonials, and observations from medical staff across multiple departments, Dr. Harrison continued, presenting specific examples of my impact that I had not realized were being systematically tracked and evaluated. The documentation of my contributions through multiple sources provided objective validation of effectiveness that countered any tendency to minimize or dismiss the significance of my work. The systematic tracking suggested that the hospital had been observing my approach to patient interaction with professional interest rather than casual appreciation. Dr. Harrison concluded the hospital meeting by emphasizing their hope that I would accept the scholarship opportunity regardless of any other professional directions I might choose to pursue. The separation of educational support from employment commitment provided flexibility that made the decision easier while demonstrating genuine investment in my development as a healthcare professional. Thursday afternoon brought the meeting, with representatives from the Regional Baptist Association, held at their headquarters in downtown Nashville. The setting was less intimidating than the hospital's executive conference room, yet the significance of the opportunity being discussed was equally substantial and potentially more transformative for my long-term career direction. Reverend Dr. James Patterson, the association's Director of Ministry Development, opened our discussion by explaining the context and vision for the healthcare ministry program they were hoping to establish. His presentation revealed the comprehensive nature of their planning and the serious commitment they were making to addressing healthcare-related spiritual and emotional needs across their member churches. The Healthcare Ministry Initiative represents our recognition that faith communities have both an opportunity and a responsibility to provide support for members facing medical challenges, Dr. Patterson explained, outlining a vision that extended beyond traditional pastoral care to encompass systematic training and coordination of volunteer support services. The scope of the program being proposed involved developing training curricula for volunteers, establishing partnerships with healthcare institutions, creating resource materials for families facing medical crises, and coordinating support services across multiple congregations. The complexity and ambition of the vision required someone with both practical healthcare experience and understanding of faith community dynamics. We have been searching for someone who can bridge the gap between medical knowledge and spiritual care, someone who understands both the practical needs of patients and families and the resources that faith communities can provide, Dr. Patterson continued, explaining why my background made me an ideal candidate for leading this initiative. The emphasis on bridging different worlds reflected recognition that effective healthcare ministry required expertise in multiple areas that were rarely combined in a single individual. My experience in hospital settings provided practical knowledge of medical systems, while my lifelong involvement in church communities offered understanding of how faith-based support could complement clinical treatment. Mrs. Catherine Williams, the association's Director of Women's Ministries, joined the discussion to outline the specific responsibilities and support structure that would be provided for the Healthcare Ministry Coordinator position. Her presentation demonstrated their serious commitment to ensuring success through adequate resources and institutional support. The position would involve developing and implementing training programs for volunteer coordinators in each of our member churches, creating partnerships with hospitals and medical practices to establish appropriate referral and communication systems, and providing ongoing consultation and support for families facing complex medical situations, Mrs. Williams explained, describing responsibilities that would utilize both my healthcare knowledge and ministry experience. The structured approach to volunteer training and institutional partnerships revealed sophisticated thinking about sustainable program development rather than informal charitable efforts. The emphasis on systematic coordination across multiple churches suggested potential for significant regional impact through properly organized and supported ministry efforts. Dr. Patterson then addressed the educational support that would be provided to prepare me for these expanded responsibilities, including seminary coursework in pastoral care, healthcare ethics, and ministry administration. The combination of practical experience with formal theological education would provide credentials and knowledge necessary for effective leadership in denominational settings. We would also provide opportunities for you to visit and learn from established healthcare ministry programs in other regions, allowing you to understand best practices and avoid common implementation challenges, Dr. Patterson added, demonstrating their commitment to thorough preparation rather than expecting immediate expertise in unfamiliar areas. The emphasis on learning from existing programs reflected practical wisdom about program development and suggested that the association had conducted thorough research before designing their initiative. The opportunity to study successful models would provide valuable insights that could prevent costly mistakes and accelerate effective implementation. The financial aspects of the ministry position included competitive salary, comprehensive benefits, and support for continuing education that would ensure long-term sustainability and professional development. The compensation package reflected serious organizational commitment rather than volunteer expectations or minimal support. As both meetings concluded, I found myself processing not only the specific details of each opportunity, but also the broader implications for my understanding of professional possibility and personal calling. The convergence of recognition from both medical and religious institutions suggested that my work had created a reputation that extended beyond any single organizational context. The hospital scholarship represented an opportunity to develop clinical expertise and healthcare administration knowledge that would enhance my effectiveness in any patient advocacy role. The comprehensive educational support would provide credentials and skills that could support various career directions while maintaining focus on holistic patient care. The ministry position offered a platform for expanding my impact beyond individual patient interactions to systematic program development that could affect multiple communities. The regional scope of the role would allow me to influence healthcare ministry practices across dozens of churches while developing resources that could benefit thousands of families. Both opportunities required courage to move beyond the familiar environment of my current night shift position toward responsibilities that would challenge my capabilities and expand my professional identity. The decisions would determine not only my immediate career direction, but also the long-term trajectory of my service and impact. The week of meetings had revealed that my hospital work had created a foundation for opportunities that exceeded my previous understanding of what might be possible for someone with my background and credentials. The external recognition provided perspective on my own potential that differed dramatically from the family disappointment narrative that had shaped my self-perception for years. The choice between opportunities, or potentially pursuing both through creative scheduling and coordination, would require careful consideration of my authentic calling and the most effective use of my developing capabilities. The decisions would test whether I possessed the courage to embrace possibilities that had never seemed available or appropriate for someone in my circumstances. Standing at the intersection of medical and ministry opportunities, I began to understand that my unconventional path had been preparing me for forms of service that required exactly the combination of experience, education, and character that I had been developing without conscious recognition of their ultimate purpose or value. The days following my meetings with hospital administration and the Regional Baptist Association brought a period of intense reflection and prayer as I grappled with choices that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of my professional life and personal identity. The magnitude of both opportunities required careful consideration that extended beyond immediate preferences to encompass long-term vision for service and impact. My decision-making process began with systematic evaluation of how each opportunity aligned with my authentic calling and the qualities that had earned recognition from both medical and ministry professionals. The hospital scholarship represented advancement within familiar territory, where I had already demonstrated competence and effectiveness, while the regional ministry position offered expansion into areas that would require significant new skill development and broader leadership responsibilities. The scholarship opportunity provided a clear pathway for enhancing my clinical knowledge and healthcare administration capabilities, while maintaining connection to the patient care environment where I had found deep satisfaction and purpose. The structured educational program would build upon my existing foundation while providing credentials that could support various forms of patient advocacy and healthcare ministry throughout my career. The comprehensive nature of the educational support addressed practical concerns about financial stability during the degree completion process, while ensuring that my learning would be enhanced by continued hands-on experience through internship rotations across different hospital departments. The combination of academic study with practical application represented an ideal approach to professional development that would maximize both knowledge acquisition and skill refinement. However, the regional ministry position offered opportunities for systemic impact that extended far beyond individual patient interactions to encompass program development that could benefit multiple communities and establish sustainable support networks for families facing medical crises. The scope of potential influence represented a multiplication of impact that appealed to my desire to address healthcare-related spiritual and emotional needs on a broader scale. The ministry role would require courage to move beyond the clinical environment where I had established competence and credibility toward responsibilities that would test my leadership abilities and capacity for program development. The transition would involve learning new skills in areas such as volunteer coordination, institutional partnership development, and resource creation that differed significantly from direct patient care activities. My prayer and reflection process included seeking guidance from individuals whose wisdom and experience could provide perspective on the decision I faced. Pastor Williams offered pastoral counseling that helped me understand the spiritual dimensions of choosing between opportunities that both appeared to align with divine calling and purpose. Sarah, the question is not which opportunity is more worthy or appropriate, but which direction will allow you to use your gifts most effectively in service to others, Pastor Williams counseled during our private meeting in his office. Both paths offer legitimate ways to expand your ministry and impact, and the choice should be based on your understanding of how God is calling you to grow and serve. The pastoral guidance emphasized discernment of calling rather than external expectations or conventional measures of success. Pastor Williams encouraged me to consider which direction would provide the greatest opportunity for developing and utilizing the qualities that had earned recognition while challenging me to expand my capabilities and influence. Dr. Harrison provided additional perspective when I requested a follow-up conversation to discuss my decision-making process. Her insights reflected both professional understanding of healthcare career development and personal appreciation for the unique contributions I could make in either direction. The wonderful thing about both opportunities is that they build upon the foundation you have already established, rather than requiring you to abandon your previous experience, Dr. Harrison observed during our discussion. Whether you choose to advance within healthcare administration or expand into ministry coordination, you will be utilizing the same core abilities that have made you effective in patient advocacy and family support. The continuity between my current work and both future opportunities provided reassurance that my decision would represent growth rather than departure from established strengths and interests. The recognition that either choice would build upon proven capabilities rather than requiring complete reorientation made both options feel more manageable and authentic. My sister Rebecca proved to be an unexpectedly valuable source of perspective during this decision-making period. Her experience with entrepreneurial risk-taking and business development provided insights into evaluating opportunities based on potential for growth and impact rather than security and predictability. What strikes me about both opportunities is that organizations are investing in you because they recognize exceptional potential, Rebecca observed during a private conversation over coffee. The question is not which choice is safer or more conventional, but which direction will allow you to make the greatest contribution while developing capabilities that align with your authentic interests and strengths. Rebecca's business perspective emphasized the significance of being recruited for opportunities rather than having to seek them out, noting that such recognition indicated exceptional performance and suggested strong likelihood of continued success in expanded roles. Her entrepreneurial experience provided understanding of how calculated risks could lead to extraordinary outcomes when pursued with proper preparation and commitment. The family dynamics surrounding my decision-making process reflected the ongoing transformation in how my parents and sister understood my capabilities and potential. The external validation from medical and ministry professionals had created new respect for my judgment and autonomy, yet it had also generated anxiety about decisions that diverged from conventional career advancement patterns. My father approached the discussion with characteristic analytical rigor, developing detailed comparisons of financial benefits, professional advancement opportunities, and long-term security considerations associated with each choice. His business background led him to emphasize measurable outcomes and predictable returns on investment, though he demonstrated new willingness to consider non-traditional measures of success and satisfaction. Both opportunities represent significant professional advancement, but they require different types of courage and preparation, my father acknowledged during one of our family discussions. The hospital position builds upon established relationships and proven competence, while the ministry role requires faith in your ability to succeed in unfamiliar territory with broader responsibilities. My mother's perspective reflected her gradual acceptance that my path might legitimately differ from conventional expectations, while maintaining her concern about choices that seemed risky or unconventional. Her social consciousness led her to consider how each option would be perceived within the church and broader community, though she demonstrated new appreciation for the recognition I had received from respected institutions. What impresses me about both opportunities is that they represent genuine recognition of your abilities rather than charity or sympathy, my mother admitted during a private conversation. The fact that medical professionals and denominational leaders are actively recruiting you suggests that your work has created a reputation that extends beyond our immediate community. The acknowledgement that my achievements represented merit-based recognition rather than sympathy marked a significant shift in my mother's understanding of my capabilities and potential. Her willingness to reconsider previous assumptions about my choices demonstrated how external validation could influence family dynamics and create space for more authentic relationships. As my reflection process continued, I began to understand that the decision I faced represented more than choosing between specific opportunities. The choice would determine whether I would pursue advancement within familiar systems or embrace the challenge of creating new programs and approaches that could address needs in innovative ways. The hospital scholarship represented excellence within established frameworks where success could be measured through conventional metrics such as degree completion, certification achievement, and administrative advancement. The predictable nature of the educational pathway provided security and clear benchmarks for progress that appealed to both my practical concerns and my family's preferences for measurable outcomes. However, the ministry position offered opportunities for innovation and creativity that could establish new models for healthcare ministry and community support. The scope for developing original approaches to addressing spiritual and emotional needs related to medical challenges appealed to my desire to contribute solutions to problems that had not been adequately addressed through existing programs. The creative aspect of the ministry role would require entrepreneurial thinking and program development skills that differed significantly from the clinical competencies I had been developing through my hospital work. The transition would involve learning to coordinate volunteers, develop training materials, establish institutional partnerships, and create sustainable support systems that could function effectively across multiple church communities. My decision-making process ultimately focused on which opportunity would provide the greatest platform for addressing the human needs I had observed during my years of hospital work. The families I had supported during medical crises often struggled with spiritual and emotional challenges that extended beyond what clinical treatment could address, yet they had limited access to coordinated support systems that could provide comprehensive assistance. The ministry position offered a pathway for developing systematic responses to these needs through training volunteers, creating resource materials, and establishing partnerships between faith communities and healthcare institutions. The potential for building sustainable support networks that could serve multiple communities represented multiplication of impact that exceeded what I could achieve through individual patient advocacy alone. After weeks of prayer, reflection, and consultation with trusted advisors, I reached the decision that would define the next phase of my professional life and personal growth. The choice required courage to embrace responsibilities that exceeded my previous experience while trusting that the same qualities that had earned recognition in hospital settings would prove effective in ministry coordination and program development. The decision-making process had revealed that both opportunities were valuable and legitimate expressions of calling, but the ministry position offered greater potential for addressing systemic needs through innovative program development. The chance to create new models for healthcare ministry that could be replicated across multiple communities provided a platform for impact that aligned with my growing understanding of purpose and potential. My choice to accept the Regional Baptist Association position represented faith in my ability to grow into expanded responsibilities while maintaining the patient advocacy focus that had given my work meaning and effectiveness. The decision required willingness to move beyond the security of familiar hospital routines toward the uncertainty and creativity demanded by program development and institutional leadership. The transformation from night shift clerk to regional ministry coordinator represented more than professional advancement. The journey had revealed that authentic calling could create opportunities that exceeded conventional expectations when pursued with dedication and integrity, and that recognition often came from unexpected sources when service was motivated by genuine care for others rather than personal advancement. Standing at the threshold of this new chapter, I understood that my decision represented not just acceptance of a position, but embrace of a vision for service that would challenge me to develop capabilities I had not known I possessed while addressing needs that had been inadequately served through existing approaches to healthcare ministry and community support. The Regional Baptist Association headquarters occupied a modest 3-story brick building in downtown Nashville, where 43 member churches coordinated their shared ministry efforts and community outreach programs. Walking through the main entrance on my first Monday morning as healthcare ministry coordinator, I carried both excitement about the opportunities ahead and uncertainty about my ability to fulfill the ambitious vision that had been outlined during my recruitment process. Dr. Patterson met me in the reception area with the warm professionalism that had characterized our previous interactions, though I detected an underlying concern that suggested he too understood the magnitude of the challenges involved in launching an entirely new ministry program from inception. The Healthcare Ministry Initiative represented uncharted territory for the association, requiring innovation and program development that would test both my capabilities and their institutional support systems. The office space allocated for the Healthcare Ministry program reflected the association's serious commitment to the initiative, while also revealing the practical constraints within which I would need to operate. The furnished office included essential equipment and supplies, yet the empty filing cabinets and blank walls emphasized that every aspect of program development would require creation from foundational principles rather than adaptation of existing systems. Dr. Patterson began our orientation meeting by reviewing the comprehensive scope of responsibilities that would define my role during the initial program development phase. The Healthcare Ministry Coordinator position encompassed volunteer training program development, institutional partnership establishment, resource material creation, and ongoing consultation services for member churches facing complex medical situations within their congregations. The first 6 months will focus primarily on assessment and planning activities that will establish the foundation for sustainable program implementation, Dr. Patterson explained, outlining a timeline that balanced ambitious goals with realistic expectations about what could be accomplished without existing infrastructure or established procedures. The assessment phase would require systematic evaluation of healthcare-related needs across member churches, identification of existing resources and capabilities within congregations, and analysis of potential partnership opportunities with medical institutions and community organizations. The comprehensive nature of this preliminary work reflected thorough planning, while also revealing the substantial preparation required before program implementation could begin. The institutional partnership development represented one of the most challenging aspects of my initial responsibilities, as it required establishing relationships with healthcare organizations that had limited previous experience with faith-based community support programs. The partnerships would need to address professional standards and legal requirements, while creating meaningful collaboration that benefited both medical institutions and church communities. My first week included meetings with representatives from 3 major healthcare systems in the Nashville metropolitan area, each presenting different perspectives on the potential value and practical challenges of coordinating medical care with faith-based family support services. These conversations revealed both enthusiasm for innovative approaches to patient advocacy and concern about maintaining appropriate boundaries between clinical treatment and spiritual care. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Director of Social Services at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, provided insights that would prove crucial for developing effective partnership protocols. Her extensive experience with community outreach programs offered practical guidance about establishing collaboration that respected professional standards while enhancing patient care through comprehensive support systems. The key to successful partnership between healthcare institutions and faith communities lies in clear communication about roles, responsibilities, and appropriate boundaries, Dr. Mitchell explained during our initial consultation. Medical. Professionals need assurance that spiritual care providers understand clinical environments and can complement rather than complicate treatment protocols. The emphasis on complementary rather than competitive approaches to patient support provided a framework for developing partnership agreements that addressed institutional concerns while creating meaningful opportunities for faith-based assistance. The distinction between spiritual care and medical treatment would require careful attention throughout all program development activities. The volunteer training program development represented another significant challenge that required creating comprehensive educational materials and systematic preparation protocols for individuals with varying backgrounds and experience levels. The training would need to address both practical skills for providing effective support and theoretical understanding of appropriate boundaries and professional relationships within healthcare settings. My approach to curriculum development drew upon my hospital experience while incorporating insights from pastoral care literature and best practices from established healthcare ministry programs in other regions. The combination of practical knowledge and academic resources created a foundation for training materials that would prepare volunteers for the complex situations they would encounter while serving families facing medical crises. The initial volunteer recruitment efforts within member churches revealed diverse attitudes toward healthcare ministry participation, ranging from enthusiastic commitment to cautious skepticism about the appropriateness of faith-based involvement in medical situations. Understanding and addressing these varied perspectives would prove essential for building sustainable volunteer support systems across different congregational cultures and theological orientations. Mrs. Dorothy Henderson, a retired nurse from First Baptist Church of Franklin, emerged as an early advocate for the healthcare ministry program and volunteer coordinator for her congregation. Her medical background and church leadership experience provided valuable insights into the practical challenges and opportunities involved in implementing effective support programs at the local church level. The families in our congregation who have faced serious medical situations often struggled with spiritual and emotional challenges that extended far beyond what pastoral counseling could address, Mrs. Henderson observed during our planning meeting. Having trained volunteers who understand both medical systems and faith-based support could make an enormous difference for families navigating complex healthcare situations. The recognition that existing pastoral care resources were insufficient to address the comprehensive needs of families facing medical crises validated the underlying premise of the Healthcare Ministry Initiative, while also highlighting the importance of developing effective training and support systems for volunteer coordinators. The resource material development required creating guides, brochures, and reference documents that could be used by volunteers, church leaders, and families facing various medical situations. The materials needed to provide practical information about healthcare systems and patient rights, while offering spiritual encouragement and emotional support strategies that reflected sound theological principles and pastoral care practices. My approach to resource creation involved collaboration with medical professionals, pastoral care specialists, and families who had navigated significant healthcare challenges. The diverse perspectives ensured that materials would address real needs while maintaining accuracy and appropriateness for use in various church and medical settings. The legal and ethical considerations surrounding healthcare ministry activities required consultation with attorneys specializing in nonprofit organization liability and healthcare law. The complexity of regulations governing patient privacy, volunteer activities, and institutional partnerships demanded careful attention to compliance requirements that could affect both individual volunteers and the association as a whole. Attorney Rebecca Walsh, who specialized in healthcare law, provided guidance that proved essential for developing appropriate protocols and documentation. Her expertise helped establish procedures that would protect both volunteers and the organizations. They served while ensuring that healthcare ministry activities remained within appropriate legal boundaries. The primary legal considerations involve maintaining clear distinctions between spiritual support and medical advice, ensuring appropriate training and supervision of volunteers, and establishing documentation procedures that protect patient privacy while enabling effective communication between healthcare institutions and faith communities, Attorney Walsh explained during our consultation. The legal framework she outlined required systematic attention to volunteer training content, partnership agreement language, and ongoing supervision procedures that would ensure compliance with relevant regulations while preserving the flexibility necessary for effective ministry implementation. The first month of program development revealed both the enormous potential for positive impact and the substantial challenges involved in creating sustainable systems for healthcare ministry coordination. The complexity of institutional partnerships, volunteer training requirements, and legal compliance considerations exceeded my initial expectations, while also demonstrating the importance of thorough preparation before program implementation. The feedback from early stakeholder meetings indicated strong support for the healthcare ministry vision among both church leaders and medical professionals. Yet it also revealed diverse expectations about program scope and implementation approaches that would require careful navigation during the development process. Balancing ambitious goals with realistic timelines became a constant consideration in all planning activities. My personal growth during this initial period required rapid development of skills in areas such as program planning, institutional, relationship building, and volunteer coordination that differed significantly from the direct patient care activities that had characterized my previous work experience. The learning curve was steep, yet the foundation of practical healthcare, knowledge and genuine care for families facing medical challenges provided confidence that enabled effective adaptation to new responsibilities. The support from association leadership proved crucial during moments of uncertainty about my ability to manage the scope and complexity of program development requirements. Dr. Patterson and other senior staff provided guidance and encouragement that helped maintain perspective about the long-term vision while addressing immediate challenges and obstacles. The family response to my career transition reflected their ongoing adjustment to understanding my capabilities and potential in ways that differed from their previous assumptions and expectations. My parents expressed pride in my professional advancement, while also revealing continued concern about the security and predictability of ministry work compared to traditional healthcare employment. Rebecca provided particularly valuable support during this transition period, offering insights from her business experience about managing complex projects and building professional relationships with diverse stakeholders. Her entrepreneurial perspective helped me understand how to approach program development with strategic thinking and systematic planning that would support long-term success. The first 2 months of healthcare ministry coordination confirmed both the validity of the vision that had attracted institutional support and the necessity of patient, methodical development of systems and relationships that would enable sustainable implementation. The work required different types of courage and perseverance than direct patient care, yet it utilized the same fundamental commitment to serving families during difficult circumstances. Standing in my association office at the end of my first 60 days, surrounded by developing program materials and partnership agreements, I understood that my journey from family disappointment to recognized ministry leader represented more than personal achievement. The healthcare ministry program had potential to transform how faith communities supported members facing medical challenges, while demonstrating that authentic calling could create opportunities for service that exceeded conventional expectations and traditional boundaries between different professional and spiritual domains. 3 months into my role as healthcare ministry coordinator, the theoretical frameworks and careful planning that had occupied my initial period were suddenly tested by a devastating family crisis that would define both my effectiveness as a ministry leader and the viability of the entire healthcare ministry program. The call came on a Thursday morning from Pastor Michael Stevens of Grace Community Church in Murfreesboro, his voice carrying the weight of urgent concern that immediately commanded my complete attention. The Thompson family from Pastor Stevens Congregation faced a medical emergency that encompassed every challenge the healthcare ministry program had been designed to address. 8-year-old Emma Thompson had been diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, requiring immediate intensive treatment at Vanderbilt Children's Hospital that would involve months of chemotherapy, radiation therapy, and potential bone marrow transplantation procedures. The medical complexity of Emma's condition represented only the beginning of the challenges confronting the Thompson family. David Thompson worked as a construction supervisor for a small residential building company that provided minimal health insurance coverage with substantial deductibles and copayment requirements. His wife Jennifer had previously worked part-time as a retail associate, but Emma's diagnosis would require her full-time presence at the hospital for treatment support and advocacy. The financial implications of Emma's treatment would devastate the Thompson family's economic stability, while they simultaneously faced the emotional trauma of their daughter's life-threatening illness. The medical bills would quickly exceed their annual income, yet the treatment could not be delayed or compromised without risking Emma's survival chances. The family faced impossible choices between financial security and their child's life. Pastor Stevens explained that Grace Community Church was a relatively small congregation with limited financial resources and no established protocols for supporting families through major medical crises. The church leadership wanted to provide meaningful assistance, yet they lacked both the knowledge and systems necessary for coordinating comprehensive support that could address the Thompson family's complex needs effectively. "We feel called to help the Thompson family, but we honestly don't know where to begin or how to organize our efforts most effectively," Pastor Stevens admitted during our phone conversation. "This is exactly the kind of situation where your healthcare ministry program could make a real difference, but we need guidance about how to proceed in ways that will actually help rather than create additional stress for the family." The honesty of Pastor Stevens's request reflected both the genuine desire to serve and the practical limitations that many congregations faced when confronting major medical situations within their membership. The healthcare ministry program had been designed precisely to address these coordination challenges, yet this would represent the first comprehensive test of the systems and training materials that had been developed. My response to the Thompson family crisis required immediate mobilization of resources that had been created during the previous 3 months, while simultaneously testing whether the theoretical frameworks could function effectively under the pressure of real-world emergency circumstances. The situation demanded both pastoral sensitivity and practical coordination skills that would determine the credibility of the entire healthcare ministry initiative. The initial assessment involved meeting with the Thompson family at Vanderbilt Children's Hospital to understand their specific needs and concerns, while beginning the process of coordinating support services that could address their financial, logistical, and emotional challenges. The hospital environment provided familiar territory for these conversations, yet the complexity of the family's situation required comprehensive thinking that extended far beyond individual patient advocacy. David and Jennifer Thompson were overwhelmed by the sudden transformation of their lives from normal family routines to the intensive medical environment where their daughter's survival depended on treatments they barely understood. The medical terminology, insurance procedures, and treatment protocols created confusion that compounded their emotional distress and made effective decision-making increasingly difficult. Jennifer Thompson had been maintaining a vigil at Emma's bedside since the diagnosis, leaving their home and other children in the care of extended family members while trying to understand complex medical information and advocate for appropriate care. Her exhaustion was evident, yet she feared leaving the hospital for even brief periods, convinced that her presence was essential for ensuring optimal treatment for her daughter. David Thompson continued working construction projects during the day while spending evenings and weekends at the hospital, attempting to maintain family income while supporting his wife and daughter through the medical crisis. The physical and emotional demands were creating stress that affected his job performance and threatened the employment stability that provided their primary financial support. The assessment conversations revealed that the Thompson family needed comprehensive support, that addressed financial assistance, logistical coordination, emotional counseling, and spiritual encouragement in ways that complemented, rather than complicated, the medical treatment process. The complexity of their needs required systematic coordination among multiple support providers while maintaining sensitivity to family preferences and medical protocols. The financial challenges required immediate attention to prevent the family from falling behind on essential expenses while Emma's treatment proceeded. The medical bills would accumulate rapidly, yet the family also needed continued income to maintain housing, utilities, and basic living expenses for their other children, who remained at home under the care of grandparents and extended family members. My coordination efforts began with connecting the Thompson family to financial assistance programs available through Vanderbilt Children's Hospital, including charity care applications, payment plan options, and access to pharmaceutical company assistance programs that could reduce medication costs. The hospital's financial counselors provided guidance about navigating insurance procedures and maximizing coverage benefits while minimizing out-of-pocket expenses. However, the hospital-based financial assistance programs would address only a portion of the family's economic challenges. The loss of Jennifer's part-time income and David's reduced working hours due to hospital visits would create ongoing financial stress that required additional support beyond medical bill assistance. The healthcare ministry program needed to coordinate church and community resources to address these broader financial stability concerns. The logistical support coordination involved organizing volunteer assistance for practical needs such as meal preparation, childcare for the Thompson family's other children, transportation to medical appointments, and household maintenance activities that had become impossible to manage while focusing on Emma's treatment. These services required careful scheduling and volunteer training to ensure reliability and appropriateness. Mrs. Dorothy Henderson from First Baptist Church of Franklin proved invaluable during this coordination process, utilizing her nursing, background, and volunteer coordination experience to develop systematic approaches for organizing practical support services. Her medical knowledge enabled effective communication with hospital staff, while her church leadership experience provided insights into mobilizing congregational resources efficiently. The volunteer coordination required establishing communication systems that kept support providers informed about changing needs and schedules, while protecting family privacy and maintaining appropriate boundaries between helpers and the medical treatment process. The balance between comprehensive assistance and respectful space proved challenging to maintain as volunteers navigated their desire to help with recognition of family autonomy. The emotional and spiritual support aspects of the healthcare ministry response required coordination between pastoral counseling resources and professional mental health services that could address the trauma and stress associated with childhood cancer treatment. The integration of faith-based and clinical support demanded careful attention to both theological principles and evidence-based therapeutic approaches. Pastor Stevens provided primary pastoral care for the Thompson family while consulting with me about additional resources that could support their spiritual and emotional needs during the extended treatment process. The coordination between pastoral counseling and healthcare ministry support required clear communication about roles and responsibilities to avoid duplication or contradiction of guidance provided to the family. The pediatric oncology social worker at Vanderbilt Children's Hospital, Ms. Sarah Collins, became a crucial partner in coordinating comprehensive support that addressed both clinical and spiritual dimensions of the family's experience. Her expertise in childhood cancer support services provided professional perspective that enhanced the effectiveness of faith-based assistance while ensuring compliance with hospital protocols and patient care standards. The development of a comprehensive support plan for the Thompson family required weekly coordination meetings that included Pastor Stevens, key volunteers from Grace Community Church, hospital social services staff, and financial counselors who could address the various aspects of the family's needs systematically. The collaborative approach ensured that support efforts remained coordinated and effective while avoiding overwhelming the family with unorganized assistance. The first month of healthcare ministry support for the Thompson family tested every aspect of the program development work that had been completed during my initial 3 months in the coordinator role. The volunteer training materials, partnership protocols, and resource guides were evaluated under real-world conditions that revealed both strengths and areas requiring refinement. The financial assistance coordination proved more complex than anticipated, requiring navigation of multiple application processes and eligibility requirements that varied among different assistance programs. The healthcare ministry program needed to develop more comprehensive guidance materials that could help families understand and access available financial support more efficiently. The volunteer coordination revealed the importance of ongoing training and supervision to ensure that well-meaning assistance remained appropriate and helpful rather than intrusive or burdensome to families facing medical crises. The balance between comprehensive support and respectful boundaries required continuous attention and adjustment based on family feedback and changing circumstances. The institutional partnership with Vanderbilt Children's Hospital demonstrated both the value of formal collaboration agreements and the necessity of ongoing communication to address coordination challenges as they emerged. The hospital staff appreciated the systematic approach to community support coordination, yet they also identified areas where protocols needed refinement to ensure optimal integration with clinical care processes. The Thompson family's response to the healthcare ministry's support validated the underlying premise of the program, while also providing insights into how comprehensive assistance could be most effectively delivered. Jennifer Thompson expressed particular appreciation for the coordination approach that reduced the burden of managing multiple support providers while ensuring that their needs were addressed systematically. David Thompson noted that the financial assistance coordination had prevented the family from falling behind on essential expenses while allowing him to maintain focus on supporting his wife and daughter through the medical treatment process. The practical support had reduced stress that could have compromised his ability to function effectively in both work and family responsibilities. Emma Thompson's medical treatment proceeded successfully during the first month of intensive support, with her oncology team noting that the family's emotional stability and comprehensive support system appeared to contribute positively to her response to therapy. The integration of medical treatment with coordinated community support demonstrated the potential value of healthcare ministry programs for patient outcomes, as well as family well-being. The success of the Thompson Family Support Coordination created visibility for the healthcare ministry program among other regional Baptist Association member churches and healthcare institutions throughout the Nashville metropolitan area. The BAL's systematic approach to addressing complex family needs during medical crises provided a model that other congregations expressed interest in implementing within their own communities. Standing in my association office 6 weeks after receiving Pastor Stevens's initial call, surrounded by documentation of the comprehensive support coordination that had been provided to the Thompson family, I understood that the healthcare ministry program had proven its value through practical demonstration rather than theoretical planning. The real-world testing had revealed both the potential for significant impact and the ongoing refinement necessary for sustainable program implementation across multiple church communities. The success of the Thompson Family Support Coordination created ripple effects throughout the Regional Baptist Association network that exceeded my most optimistic projections for program visibility and institutional interest. Within 6 weeks of implementing comprehensive healthcare ministry support for Emma Thompson's leukemia treatment, pastors from 14 different member churches had contacted the association headquarters requesting information about establishing similar programs within their own congregations. Dr. Patterson called me into his office on a Monday morning 8 weeks after the Thompson family crisis had begun, his expression reflecting both satisfaction with program results and anticipation about opportunities that were emerging from the demonstrated effectiveness of systematic healthcare ministry coordination. The conversation would reveal developments that would fundamentally alter the scope and trajectory of my professional responsibilities, while validating the vision that had initially attracted institutional support for the healthcare ministry initiative. The documentation I had maintained throughout the Thompson family support process had provided comprehensive evidence of program impact that impressed both association leadership and external organizations monitoring innovative approaches to faith-based community service. The systematic tracking of financial assistance coordination, volunteer engagement, institutional partnerships, and family outcomes had created a case study that demonstrated measurable benefits of comprehensive healthcare ministry programming. Dr. Patterson began our meeting by reviewing feedback that had been received from Vanderbilt Children's Hospital regarding the effectiveness of the coordinated support approach that had been implemented for the Thompson family. The medical institution's evaluation provided external validation of program value that carried significant weight with association board members and potential partner organizations. Dr. Sarah Mitchell from Vanderbilt's Social Services Department,